Okay, so this video is about how to do the worksheet that's associated with the checkpoint of zeros. So, first of all, zeros and roots. Well, zeros zeros and roots are really talking about the same thing. They really mean the same thing numerically. It's just that zeros are referring to the graph, really. We'll talk about, what are the zeros of that graph? And we'll talk about the roots of an equation. So just a difference in vocabulary with how we refer to these things. So they mean the same thing numerically, which is they're both referring to the place where the graph is crossing the x-axis, okay, which is where the y value is 0. So that's why they're called zeros. The y value here is 0. So how do we find the zeros? In order to do that, we're going to set the equation equal to 0 and then solve for x. So how do we solve for x? Well, we can do it, we've been doing it using the quadratic formula, but you can also do it by factoring, which is what we're going to focus on now. So we're going to set it equal to 0, we're going to factor, and then we're going to put each part equal to 0, which is the zero product property. So looking at number 1 here, it's already factored for us, and it's already equal to 0. So the only thing we have to do here is put each part equal to 0. So we say 2x plus 3 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. And subtracting the 3 to the other side gives us 2x equals negative 3, x equals negative 3 over 2. And for the other one, x equals negative 4. So that's it for those questions. Now some of them are not already factored. So if we come down and look at number 5. So here, we're going to just group these. And if I look at these first two, 4 and 16 have a 4 in common. And I can also pull out an x squared. So when I factor a 4x squared out from this, I have an x left from that term. And 16 divided by 4 gives me 4. And I pulled out both x's, so they're gone. Now looking at the second two terms, what do they have in common? Well, they both have a negative 5. Let's factor out negative 5. Okay, that leaves an x here, and negative 20 divided by negative 5 would give me positive 4. Now I can see that they both have an x plus 4 in common, so factoring that out, the factored form is 4x squared minus 5 times x plus 4. Still equals 0. Now we can do the exact same thing we did on numbers 1 through 4 above, which is to put each part equal to 0. So now I've got 4x squared minus 5 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. So to do this, I'm going to add the 5 to the other side. So 4x squared equals 5. Divide by 4, we have x squared equals 5 over 4. And then, to get rid of the squared, you have to take the square root. So we have x equals plus or minus the square root of 5 over 4. So when you have that squared there, in order to get rid of it, we had to do square root. Now notice that's the same. A lot of people were pausing when they got to number 4 here. Again, you're setting each part equal to 0. When you put this part equal to 0, after you move the 2 over, you will have to take the square root of both sides. And remember when you take the square root that the answer can be positive or negative. Now move the 4 over, and so we have x also equals negative 4. Please notice that we have 3 answers here. We have positive square root of 5 over 4, negative square root of 5 over 4, and negative 4. That's 3 answers. And I can see that the degree of this polynomial here is 3. So 3 answers when the degree is 3 here. Now, we are going to expect to have 2 answers when we do number 8 here. Just wanted to point it out because it's a slightly different format. This one's a trinomial. It doesn't have 4 parts, it only has 3. So we'd have to factor this by doing factor by grouping. But if you can't factor it, then you're just going to use the quadratic formula to find the zeros. Alright, so let's look at the back then. The directions say to write a polynomial of least degree with integral coefficients that has the given zeros. So this time you already have the zeros. If these are the zeros, then that means that x equals negative 3 over 2, x equals 5 over 4, and x equals 1. Those are my 3 zeros that I've got. I'm going to take each of these zeros and work backwards to find the factors. Then we can use the factors to get the equation. So, I'm going to start here by getting rid of the fraction by multiplying both sides by 2. That will give me 2x equals negative 3. Alright, now add the 3 to the other side. I have 2x plus 3 equals 0. Let's do that same thing for this next one, multiples 5, and subtract the 5 over 4x minus 5 equals 0. And here we can just subtract the 1 to the other side, x minus 1 equals 0. Now I have my 3 factors, so I can write my equation. The equation will multiply the factors together. So I have 2x plus 3 times 4x minus 5, and x minus 1 equals 0. There's my equation. Now at this point I'm not going to force you to multiply each of them out. You can just write each of the equations in factored form. Alright, and the next section is actually really similar to the previous section. I'm still going to do the factor by grouping, pulling out a 5x cubed here. That would leave me an x left and a plus 1 left. And then these two, I could factor out negative x, leaving x plus 1 again. So we have 5x cubed minus x, and x plus 1 for factored form. Now the difference between this and the one on the front page is that this one has an extra factor here. I can factor this part again. It looks like this has an x in common. So go ahead and pull out an x. Now we have 5x squared minus 1 and x plus 1. Okay, so again, put each part equal to 0. X equals 0. 5x squared minus 1 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. So x equals negative 1. X equals 0. And here, we're going to get x squared equals 1 over 5. X equals plus or minus the square root of 1 over 5. Alright, so please notice that we have 4 answers. 0, negative 1, positive 1 square root of 1 over 5, and negative square root of 1 over 5. And so there's a 4th power here, and we're getting 4 answers, 4 zeros for the equation. So, the only other one I wanted to really look at here was number 16, because it's a trinomial, but we still want to do the factor by grouping on it. So I'm going to do the first times the last here. 2 times 5 is 10. And then what multiplies to 10 that will add to 7? Well, 2 times 5 is 10. So I'm going to break down the 7. Break down the 7 to be negative 2x to the x squared minus 5x squared. And bring down the 5. So I broke the 7 down into these two pieces, the 7x squared into these two pieces that also have an x squared on them. And now you can do number 16 in the same manner that you're doing the other ones, by grouping and seeing what these two have in common to factor out, and seeing what these two have in common to factor out. Alright, so I'll let you finish the worksheet.